Microsoft 365 Chicago virtual event is Friday, November 13th. Please register now, put this on your calendar, come out, join us online for this. Hope to see you there. And now I'm going to turn this over to Gunja, who's going to talk to us about social analytics for Yammer.
Hi, everybody. I'll just do a quick introduction because I thought, Michael, you saved me for the last. My name is Gunja. I've been with Aon for about 8 years, and my primary role is being the Yammer product owner, which includes basically making sure that the colleagues at Aon are adopting Yammer. What else can I do to help them? Everything and anything Yammer. The technical partner that I have is Michael's team. So I'm really grateful for that. I'm going to share my screen and walk you through what I kind of prepared for today. But before I walk you through the presentation, I did want to talk about how we kind of thought that we should talk about this in this group. With Michael last month, and we were going through one of the Yammer communities that his team has been using. So he had created one community, and his team has been working on rollout of OneDrive, and we were looking how the community is performing, and it was an eye opener with the kind of metrics we had, and I'll take that as few of my examples today when we walk through the analytics we use at Aon for Yammer. So one of the first things I wanted to start with was what do we see at Aon, how the trend has changed. And Larry has been a really good partner. He knows that we've struggled with Yammer adoption over the last couple of years. But I did want to tell you that I just pulled fresh numbers yesterday, and this is like an annual snapshot from September of last year until yesterday. So if you see, like, our engaged groups have gone up by 40%, and we have over 40% of members who are engaged, which is a big number because since I have been in this role, we have been, going back and forth, kind of dwindling between 5 to 10% of engagement with users or with our communities slash groups. And I'll use groups back and forth just because the titles of all my graphs will say groups, and it's just very confusing for my brain. But yeah, so one of the things that we saw was, the engagement has spiked up. The other thing I did want to talk about is how this has spiked up during the pandemic. So if you kind of see here, you would see between March and May, where it was a major lockdown period, I think globally. Now countries are opening up, but that was the period we saw like a big spike in our Yammer engagement when people were working remotely. And I know, like me, all of you would know that that is true, but I just wanted to put some numbers in context. We also see our measure of active engagement, and I'll talk a little bit about this as well as we go forward. um, it spiked up. It's almost more than double if I just take the pandemic time. But if you compare it with the last year, the number has just gone up really high. So this is like a view of what Aon Networks looks like today. And then with that, I do want to talk about how do we get this metrics? How do we use it? What are the challenges that we have faced that we have tried to solve with these numbers? Now, I do know Yammer has improved a lot, or, I would say is providing a lot more metrics than it was before with the facelift. There is a lot more you can see or users can see when they get in onto Yammer. But what we leverage is TyGraph, and they work with us very closely. I think through Yammer, through calls, to ensure that we have the numbers we are looking for. There've been times where we go back with requests like, I would just go back and say, you know what, this is what I'm trying to figure out. Is it possible to get this kind of metrics? And they'll make it happen. So I can't be thankful enough to them to help us with that. um, I will showcase some of the numbers that we use. So we have really amazing visualizations which makes it very easy for a user who doesn't have an analytics background to understand what is the health of their community or the impact of their efforts. And we have some standard reports that come out of box from TyGraph. They focus on the entire network, and only the network admins, so people from Michael's team and myself and a couple of people on my team have access to that. So we see all of Aon data. And then I think additionally, anybody who is a group admin will see standard reports for their groups where we talk about how their group slash community engagement is or user engagement is within their own community. So the security trimming is amazing as well. And there's not a lot of manual work that I would do unless somebody wants to understand those metrics. So if you were to go and see it today, you might be just overwhelmed with the amount of data we provide to people. And so I do help people walk them through those reports, etc. But I don't have to be like, somebody needs a report, I have to go extract it. It's all very self-service oriented. So it's amazing. We also do customized reports for more matured communities, and that's where my team comes in. Our analytics analyst and myself, we actually work with some of the communities to ensure we are giving them what they need. Sometimes it might be, can you tell us who is the most engaged leader? A lot of times that's available in our standard community metrics, but sometimes they might come back to us to ask who is a person who's not part of a community but yet very influential, and can we leverage them for Yammer or for spreading the message? Simple things like that. But that's what has helped us with adoption a lot. So there are five things that I want to focus on, or we have focused on from Aon's perspective over the last 2 years to sort of increase the engagement that we have. And not necessarily they're in the order of how we followed them. So one of the major challenges we were seeing with Yammer was there were there was a lot of push initially when Yammer was rolled out. That is pre my time, where leaders would say you have to log into Yammer, and people would go in, they would sign up, but they would never come back. And I think the challenges I'll talk about are pretty common to all the other companies that you might have seen. But things like there were tons of groups. We had over 6,000 groups. And to make it worse, when Aon went through the divestiture for Alight, until our networks were separated, the Alight colleagues created tons of groups related to Alight on the Aon Yammer network. So we had a big mess that we had to clean up. And from the numbers that were available out of box from Yammer, that wasn't possible. And that's where we did a lot of cleanup through the numbers that we see today. Um, and then apart from that, things like leaders do not engage, or they don't understand what the important, or how much do people go to Yammer, what is the impact, how much readership is there. One of the major challenges is we don't know who's looking at it unless they like it. Well, that was resolved by Microsoft because now we see seen by. There's something we have around lurking. Who are the people who are just consuming the information versus people who are contributing the information? So we'll talk a little bit about each of these areas. But the five things that I want to focus on is concept of engagement within Yammer. So we measure concept of engagement in Yammer as the measure of active engagement, which is basically 12 actions which are rated or which are ranked based on the amount of effort it takes. So, a like would have lesser weightage versus a comment, or sharing would have a higher weightage because you are reaching out to more people, stuff like that. So we measure the concept of engagement based on the 12 actions, and we call it the May score just because it's too long to say. We measure the influence, which basically is what you contribute. How do people respond to what you contribute? What is the breadth of your post? How many groups does it reach out to? How many threads have you contributed to? What is your reach? and then how many people have responded or liked or created an action to your thread. So that basically calculates your influence, which is much more impactful than just seeing how much do you contribute. It adds a whole other level of impact when we talk about an influencer score. Then we also talk about thread impact, which is basically what what is the impact of the conversation you are having. We talk about lurkers, which I just mentioned briefly, like how much do you consume versus the contribution, and then group inactivity. So it's based on last message posted, and we archive anything that has not been active for a year, and we just prefix it with Z hyphen archived, and exclude it out of our reporting. And that has helped us a lot. I mean, I would love it when Yammer comes out with an auto archival or sort of archive group functionality, but this works for us in the interim. And that's helped us a lot because we don't see junk, and we don't see posts we don't want to see, or we don't see information that is really old. So with that, I'll come to the first dashboard, which is the recent activity. Now, the data that I have here is all test data, but only because I couldn't share Aeon data like this. But I got screenshots here, but I'm just gonna quickly, walk you through this, and then if we have the time, I can showcase how that works for us because it's very. Actually, let me do it that now because I'll keep talking about it. So this is how the dashboard is. Anybody who goes in can log in, and it's single sign on for us. So once they go in, they just see the reporting here based on their access level. So if I'm just a group admin, I'll see my groups. But if I'm a network admin, I'll see a lot many more um, dashboards in here. And then apart from that, one thing I did want to mention is it comes with some out of box integrations, and we don't use anything at Aeon today, but I've been working with approvals to see if we can get some org data because we get a lot of, with the maturity that we are on now, we get a lot of push for can I get it by my region or can I get it by my organization? And it's a simple click. I think, Michael, if somebody from your teams can connect the AAD to this, it's a 5 minute thing, but it's just the approval that takes us long. But this is how it works. If anybody wants to extract it, they just go here and they can export the data. I can use spotlights. I can also drill down the data in some cases where you have a lot more details. And then everything is like I can scroll, see whatever I want, sort it here. There are tons of filters. I can use all these filters. And then I can select whatever group that I want to focus on and the dates, everything. So, whatever is available to me is available to all group admins to filter on, other than the fact that they wouldn't have access to all of the data. So, just going back to my presentation because it has whatever we need and it's just easier. So a lot of times when people come to us, they will ask us questions, and the questions they ask us are hard questions because you don't have set answers, right? So somebody would say, how can you improve the engagement for my group? I don't have a standard answer because it depends where they're coming from. But I will tell you that I always tell them there are no perfect answers, but it depends. So that's the standard answer I can give them. But what we are striving to do is to give them enough data to infer the answers with the empirical evidence. So we give them all the data we have so that they can decide for themselves what works for them because it could work for one group versus the other. So I would go back to the recent activity dashboard, and what this does is it gives me a snapshot of the report period that I would look for, but it provides an overview of all the Yammer groups with the ability to select a custom time frame for analysis or to select a specific group or set of groups with a click of a mouse. And then so you would see how many groups are engaged, and this is a snapshot that I had put in the beginning of the dashboard. So you would see how many groups are engaged, how many total groups you have. And we also see for the time period that we have selected, how much was it for the similar time period before that. So you would see that from March 2019 to March 1st to March 31st, it moved from 132 to 138. So that's how you can kind of look at it. And then you have group engage members, you have how many messages were contributed by how many message contributors, and then you have an influencer score, which basically tells you who is an influencer in your community. And it is a proprietary algorithm that allows TyGraph to surface the users who are projecting most influence over the network, and they are truly our Yammer champions. So generally with all the documentation we get from Microsoft or from experts, they will talk about Yammer champions, but we always struggle. Is a Yammer champion a person who is posting regularly, who knows technology, who is from Office 365 team, who is a Yammer champion? So like I say, there are things that will help us go on a path, but it depends on each organization in terms of where they are with Yammer adoption to see what works for them. And so influencer score has really helped me to figure out these are the top 10 people on Yammer who people like to read. And so if there is something, I'm ensure if I have a message, I ensure that I'm posting it in groups where they are members of, so that it gets maximum visibility, apart from all company or the relevant group that a message is supposed to be on. We also talk about most engaged groups, most engaged members, and then it also gives like a quick overview from admin perspective. What are the new groups? What are the new members? And so I haven't gotten there just because I'm a single person managing adoption for a 60,000 colleague company. But my goal here is to get this as streamlined. And we are in middle of journey. I wouldn't say like we are scoring a 10 on 10 on this. So but we've come a long way. So my goal is, if we have new network members coming, is there any kind of standard training, like a 5 minute 10 minute thing that I can provide them, or even sort of tag them on certain conversations that talk about welcome to Yammer. And not necessarily just giving them welcome to Yammer, but giving them with tools like a quick start guide that Microsoft has provided us, and it's really helpful. And with the new groups, the way we use that is we look at it in a month's time, because we give a month to all groups to kind of start engaging on their own. And if there is no activity within a month, we'll go back and tell them or ask them, how can we help them? We're already doing this today. And so a lot of times, people are like, we were just testing how Yammer works. And so we'll just archive that group. Or sometimes people come up with duplicate groups. A group might be called commercial risks, or another group might be commercial risk solutions, another group might be commercial risk colleagues. And so we continuously work with them on a monthly basis to ensure if there is duplication, we can merge those groups together. So we'll just move the conversations, archive the redundant groups, and make sure the conversation is happening in a more impactful um, group for them. Then we have the measure of active engagement. And like I said, we talk about 12 actions. These are the actions that are taken into account, which is messages like shares, topic mentions, people mention, praise, and then views and downloads of files. And the measure of active engagement was basically, when they started, they had derived it to fulfill a better definition of what is meant by an engaged users. And then what this metrics does for us is it measures all the relevant signals, which we just talked about, aggregates them and scores them over a period of time. So I can tell what is the view of my group. And then when measuring a true adoption, it is critical for us to measure more than a few signals. but it is also important for us to track or spot trends over time that can help our community. So, as an example, and I know this is test data, but I can talk about some of the spikes here. So, as an example, like with Aeon, particularly during the period of June or July, we have Aeon United Days where we have community days, colleague days, and we do a lot of Yammer campaign during that time. And you would generally see like a big spike where that's happening, or if there's a big technology rollout happening for everybody and it's wrapping up. So, as an example, right now, yesterday was the last day for our old VPN solution. And you would see a spike over a period of a month where people are talking on Yammer about it. Or you would see a spike if there was a major announcement about Aeon made somewhere external. So when the Willis Tower Watson announcement happened, we saw a big hike or a big increase in measure of active engagement. So that kind of helps us know that, when people come to me about Yammer adoption, they're like, we want to have a Yammer group because we want to have engagement, and they don't know what it means. And so this metrics becomes really important for me to tell them, you know what, you need to have constant things to talk about to people so that they know that they need to engage. It can just happen organically. I mean, there might be few groups like very technical or tech support or communities of practice, which might just go on their own. But where we are trying to make people engage, you need to have certain initiatives. So, as an example, just last week, I worked with our cyber team to create a community, and they've come up with a rinse repeat campaign that they can do over the entire year to ensure that the engagement spikes up. So, they're doing like um, Tuesday, Monday mania, Tuesday thought leadership, Wednesday security tips, something like that. And so every week they are coming up with these initiatives. Every Monday they're going to do the same thing. Every Tuesday they're going to do the same thing. So that it kind of becomes a habit of people to get in on Yammer on the day that they like the topics, and they can have conversations around it. The next one that I do want to talk about is the group activity, and this is basically what is available to um, a set of 1,800 community managers. So, for any community or for any group, this is what they see. They see the thread impact, which is basically, so at first, like, the group activity is packed with insights to help community managers or leader to understand what is important in the network. And so if we go to thread messages, you might have thousands of messages streaming into the feed, but it's very difficult to know what is the message that has made more impact. You might just see tons of likes and you don't know if that's very important or not. Does this have business value? Is it making an impact? Those are very difficult questions to answer. But what thread impact does is it surfaces the messages that have the highest probability of impact. And right now you see multiple groups here, but I could just select all company and see what it's showing. Um, just really quickly, I'm gonna go back to my sorry, to the TyGraph page that I have, and I'm gonna go to the group activity. And you'll see all groups are selected here. But if I were to select all company, it would just give me all the metrics related to all company. And then the other thing I can do here is just select or filter on all the conversations from all company, and it would give me the threads from all company. And it's fairly like, it's as quick as this. So I can just see everything in all company right here. What are the top mentioned topics? Who are the top influencers, contributors, viewed files, etc., etc. And so that just helps you make more impactful decisions. Just going back to the presentation. So yeah, like I was talking about, so if I kind of see all these things, I can tell, at least with Aon Network, I can tell what are the conversations that people are interested in. And we figured out things that are praising people when they talk about client wins. If we are talking about a new technology, these are things that spike engagement or have more impact. These are the themes. So, a lot of times when communicators come to me, they have this question now: what is it that people like to read? Because there are two kinds of communications we see today. One is all the information that we want to give people, and people might not necessarily read it because, I'm like, I get way too many communications. But on the other side, they also come back with questions to say, what is it that people like to read? Or what is it that we want to focus on? So, as an example, during the pandemic, work from home, tips to stay healthy, things like those sort of increased. Those topics were more required. And so, even apart from Yammer, I mean, we used Yammer for those conversations, but our corporate communications team also focused on those conversations at a global level. So they did talk about, health importance. We had a couple of health initiatives that were launched. And then there were a lot of articles on our intranet talking about how can you more effectively work from home, mental health, stuff like that. So it sounds, I mean, when you look at it at face value day to day, it's very difficult to see the Yammer impact. But when you look at these numbers and go back over a period of time and see how it's impacting your organization, it makes a lot of difference. um, you can, for anybody, I mean, one of the requests that we get is, can I get a list of group members? And so it's very easy. You can actually just go in here, export this. It tells you who the group members are. It also tells you when were they last active. And so that's another smaller metrics that helps us, because I would go back and tell them, you're saying you tell your team to be active on Yammer. Well, they're not. This is the last time this person posted. So, and then you can tell how many admins are there, who are the admins. So that's another thing that we have done at Aon. Through the numbers, we have defined who is a part of our Yammer community managers group, and they have an elevated amount of support from me or my team in terms of how can we help them, right? So we have like, I think this last month was focused on, we had couple of open discussions where we invited members to come in and discuss with us what kind of help do they need around engagement. We asked them to share best practices. We talked them about their challenges and things like that. And towards the end, I would talk about what are the kind of initiatives these numbers have helped me think about from our team's perspective to help Aon at a broader level. The next And then again, you have top influencers by that particular group and contributors. A lot of times this might overlap a lot. And then the trend that I've seen at Aon is you see a lot of communicators as top contributors, but you might see non-communicators as top influencers. And not necessarily leaders might be the influencers. They would be definitely, but not necessarily. So that's very interesting to watch. Um, then we have the group health, which allows me to quickly determine like the percentage of groups that are active versus those who have gone stale. And purging those stale groups have proven to be a key factor from removing the clutter in our group. We went from 6,000 groups to 1,100 groups, and that can tell you the amount of groups that were just dead. And it actually allowed our users to focus more on what is active and important for them. It improved our home feed tremendously. um, TyGraph has also helped us with like, so the way this particular dashboard works is, I mean, I can, if I just want to see what are the groups which are active in top, last 3 months, I can just click here and it'll filter the list for the last 3 months. And then zero messages are the ones where I'll reach out to say, why do you have zero messages? You've been there for 6 months, but you've not posted anything. And that's one of the key things we do quarterly. So right now is the time where I can see my mailbox popping up with emails around that, because I did send out an email to about 60 groups to say you have zero messages. Do you want to keep this group? And a lot of people come back and say, no, we don't. We were just looking at something and we found it in another group now. So that has helped with the search results as well. We have top groups. We also do like a healthy group count. And generally it remains the same. I think it went up during the lockdown, but generally I would say like 25 to 30% is an average. And I'm being conservative on my average too, because you saw our engaged group over the year was like 40%. Then I also
I
have like,
just want to interrupt for a second and encourage folks. It's a small group and there's a lot of great content here. If you want to ask a question or something, come off mute, because we don't have the chat window working for everybody. So make mention of that. I'm sorry to interrupt you there, Gunja.
no, thank you. I was like, I actually didn't know how the format was, so I was like, maybe I have to just talk, and in the end, people will ask me. But thank you. Great. And I can go back and forth on slides. If there's something that really struck you, just feel free to ask me, and I'll go back.
So those were pretty big numbers. You said you dropped from 6,000 to 1,100
Yes.
groups.
Yes.
Was there any specific thread on why the 1,100 stayed, or is it just that was the actual active groups and the groups that you wanted to focus on?
Yes. So, I mean, bear in mind that this has been over the last 3 years. Like, when I was sharing this dashboard with Michael earlier last month, he was like, these are such good numbers. I don't think across Office 365 we might be as mature to start with these. And when I started with Yammer, our adoption was really low. And these numbers have been available to us. I mean, they've added a lot more things over the years, but most of these were available. We just didn't know how to use it. And so my first metrics that I started with was the group inactivity metrics. I was like, if I have lesser data to look at, maybe I can do more. And so we started about 3 years ago cleaning up. And what we did was we just took things that were not active we started with active over a year. So we just looked at anything that had no conversation in 1 year, and we reached out, and initially we used to reach out, schedule a call, work with them to start retiring those groups, and we realized it would take a lot of time. And then in 2017, when we did the divestiture, our groups number of groups increased. Like I said, Alight created a whole bunch of groups. And after we completed our network separation, we went and archived anything that was Alight. That's one. And then secondly, like a part of whatever was divested also had some original Aon groups. So, and honestly, that was the more active portion of Aon at that time on Yammer. So we've come a long way. I mean, I would say from 6,000, I would say about 3,500 groups was bunch of Hewitt or outsourcing groups and allied groups that we archived, but the rest of them were groups that were created. And Yammer has been around at Aon officially, like it was there from 2012, but we did have a lot of different domains and stuff, kind of like before we integrated into one since 2008. So we have cleaned up all those things, and that's why we just have 1,100 groups to look at.
And then out of those groups, how many people, like what is the amount of groups? What's the average per person? Are they like in 5 groups, 10 groups, one group? Do you have that number by any chance?
I can pull that up, but I haven't looked at it from that perspective. But you bring a good point. So after this call, I'm going to look that up.
This
But
is really
yeah.
interesting and really helpful, by the way. Thank you.
I've got a question about the impact of deleting the old content. You listed out a number of benefits.
Mhm.
I'm curious, did you get any pushback or complaints from people like, hey, that was
So
no
in
good?
some cases, so in the last 3 days, I have a new insight, and it's very refreshing because every time we do this, every quarter, there's one new thing we learn about our organization. So, I mean, anything that was Hewitt or Alight, nobody had a problem with that because those people did not exist at Aon. So it was a
Yeah, it
team,
was divested.
right? But in lot of cases, and again, we don't delete data. We only delete groups that have zero messages. We just put Z archive. We remove all the admins. So only like my team would have access to it or the tenant admins. But we will just archive the group and unlist it from search, right? So people don't even find it. But what we do is before, like if it hasn't been active, we don't see admins who were initially admins. If we see they've left the company, we just archive it. But if we do see something, we will post there. We are archiving this group as of now. The approaches, we don't email them or call them or whatever. We will just send a note to say these groups will be archived on this date. And if you need this group to be active, please have post or activity in your group before that. Otherwise, this will be archived. So
Got
I
it.
would say 85% to 90%, we don't see a pushback because people are like, they like to see content that's active. But I did realize this that there are few people who are actually using Yammer to store files only. So I did have 2 or 3 groups reach out to me over the last 2 days saying, please don't archive our groups, we store our files. So Michael, that's a good catch for us for
And
SharePoint.
did you start training them not to do that, hopefully, right?
Well, yes, I have to, right? So those are my next meetings, next week to say, you know what, you should have a SharePoint site where you're storing this.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, those are insights we get, which were very difficult to get before, right? You wouldn't know all these things unless I had these numbers.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Um, okay. Any other questions so far? Okay, then I do get this the network one, which is basically it's for me or for Michael's team. Michael, sometimes Emily helps me with these numbers, so I'm like I keep mentioning your team as well. But I think the main metrics that I look here is the lurker ratio, which basically tells me what is the percentage of consumption of content versus the contribution of the content. And we have this at an overall network level, but at a group level, I can look at it by individual. So if I go further, you would see under content consumption, we see a lurker ratio, which basically will give a list of people. It will tell us their lurker ratio. If somebody says, if let's say if there is a person who likes 100% of conversations, and he might look like an influencer, he might look like a very engaged user. His measure of active engagement may be very high, but when I look at his lurker ratio, it's 100% because he's not contributing anything to the network. He's only consuming information. So, like I said, we have to keep everything together. Like, I don't look at these numbers in silo. And you would see like people like myself, my team, communicators, especially like technology experts, all of them, they have lower lurker ratio because they are contributing a lot of information. And I would include leaders in that bucket too. A lot of leaders have lower lurker ratio because they're actually producing more content. And you would actually see, like, especially for our teams, like the Office 365 team or my team, you would see our consumption score is much lesser. Like, it's like you don't read as much you're contributing. So this is again for me as Yammer owner, it is very powerful to see who can I reach out to start contributing more. If that person is an influencer, has high engagement, there must be something that is stopping him from posting. He likes Yammer or she likes Yammer, but what is it that they don't want to post about? So that's when I can start tapping individuals to see, can I help them in some way to start posting. Other than that, I think this particular section or dashboard is very self-explanatory. Talks about how many file uploads, download, views. I do keep an eye out if I see like a crazy hike in a file view. Sometimes it might be like a picture of a dog, and so I know those are the posts that I need to avoid. But at times it's like a client win and somebody attached a logo and people are looking at it. But I mean that is a little bit lower on my priority right now. I would see top files. I would see conversations with files here, and kind of make sure a lot of times these files, again, these files are all uploaded to Yammer. They are, most of them are not on SharePoint, so that's why I keep an eye on them just to see how people are using Yammer. um, so far, whatever you saw was available to us for the last 3 years. And so we started with very basic numbers, and we kind of built on top of it. Everything I talked about, like when I'm talking about it, even to me, it sounds like, oh, I leverage the numbers so well, but it's been a journey. And we're still working on it. With all these numbers, I have been able to define what kind of campaigns do I want to run on Yammer. So I do see a lot of people struggling, or the people who are new, who are like, with the new facelift that Yammer has got. We saw like a little dip initially. So I knew like people need help with training materials. So I started like a Fact Friday, and I go there and I take material from Microsoft that they have provided through the Adoption Resource Center, and I would take them, Aeonize it, because there are certain features that we are not providing at Aeon today. So I'll take those, Aeonize it, and post it out there every Friday for people to see. Um, like I'm doing Tuesday top tips to tell them, these are the tips for Yammer. These are quick tips, this will help you. And I've seen people reaching out to me to ask them, what? I can't do XYZ. Can you tell me? We are also launching another initiative, and I think the announcement will be out in the coming week around Yammer Clinic, which is basically we are telling groups to come to us with their ailments or why it doesn't work for them, and we'll work with them to resolve their issues through these numbers. So we'll say, what is it that you want to do on Yammer, or what is the business problem you're trying to solve? Yammer may or may not work for you, but tell us what is your business problem and we'll try and solve it for you. So that's how we are kind of coming up with initiatives based on the data that you see here. um, Again, one of the things that I sort of have felt challenged with is to capture Yammer success stories. I've always been very fascinated when I see Microsoft coming out with examples around how did Yammer transform an organization. And being an organization that Aon is, um, you will see Yammer being used in pockets, but not like, oh, we love Yammer from Aon. So it's very difficult for me to tap these success stories, but looking at these numbers, I can actually tell where it's working and tap the success stories or the use cases which we are trying to build like one page of sheets so that we can elevate Yammer to leadership as well. Um, and like everywhere I read, it's very important for leaders to be engaged in Yammer. Part of it is true. I would agree to that to 75%. But it works the other way around too, because there are leaders who would not want to join Yammer because they think people don't like it. So these numbers help us again to go back and say, you know what, people do like it, and we would want you to engage. And some of the upcoming functionalities like posting on behalf of, I do understand there are leaders who don't have time for this, and those kind of functionalities would help us increase Yammer engagement even more. With that, the next two or three dashboards are fairly new. They've just started topic analysis, which actually tells me anything and everything about a topic, hashtag. It tells me how many hashtags were used. It tells me uh, where do people use most hashtags, like web, mobile. It tells me how many topic mentions, how many likes a particular topic has got, what are the groups that use topics more effectively, and then it also gives us here thread topic, and then it'll give you all the details that you need with that thread, like how many likes, messages, responses that particular thread got. And then this is very interesting for me. This is one of the most powerful analytics that I've seen in last few months. We don't use it as much yet. I'm still sort of getting my hands around this, but I did want to bring this to the presentation today. Network interactions. So this allows us to see how are people really interacting within our organization, both in terms of connectivity and in terms of volume, like how many people are talking and how they're talking. And healthy network will show me a lot of like cross connections, crossovers, patterns like you see here. Like it's all very difficult to watch, like it'll give you my head starts spinning when I look at this. uh, but you can also see island of users that can be some users that are orphaned from participation. So you see these small circles here. So this is like an untapped knowledge area that I can tap into. So these people do have certain knowledge that they collaborate, but they just want to talk between themselves. So I mean, this is really powerful to work through, but it's very important um, that the understanding of context combined with this visualization can allow me to get more insights. And you can actually see here on the left how many people were engaged and how many people interacted and how many interactions were there. And what happens is a lot of times you see like a very thick line between two users within a particular group. And that just tells me that those two people are talking to each other and other people are just liking or responding to their comments. So that kind of tells you that it's not just you need to have an active group, it's like you need to have a quality active group or network. Any thoughts, comments on this slide?
I agree. It's a little head spinning, but it is super interesting. You know, the one thing I was thinking is that it definitely takes a bit of investigative resources to figure out why you have some of those isolated groups. I mean, maybe they're top secret R&D groups that need to be isolated or something like that. So it's not always,
Yes.
the the action you take as a result of the information is not obvious.
Yes, and that's why I said the context is very important because a lot of times, it might be the way it needs to be, but it just gives you a good insight. And what it does is right now it's showing everything, but if you go and select a particular group, it will show you the interactions within that group. So that kind of helps you understand that too a little bit more.
Yep. Yeah, great.
We also started doing sentiment tracking, and I'm going to bring up the example which kind of spiked our interest and opportunity for me to speak today is that sentiment tracking. So sentiment tracking basically leverages the Microsoft Cognitive Service machine learning algorithm, and it scores sentiment on a per basis message. um, then the messages are aggregated and plotted over a period of time to understand trend lines. And it's very binary. Zero is the lowest sentiment and one is the highest. More it's towards the one, it's positive, and zero is the negative. Again, context is critical. We can provide the evidence, but what's happening around us is very important to identify why it went down or it went up. So this is like for all network. So you can see different groups, what the sentiment are, what is the May score. But if I was to select one group here, we can actually see what are the things that are influencing the sentiment to increase or decrease. And this is what happened with us. I connected with Michael to look at a group that we were working on together, which is OneDrive, with the rollout of OneDrive at Aon. And we had a Yam Jam, and I was helping them their team moderate the Yam Jam. And after that, Michael and I were just looking at numbers, and it was so exciting because it was telling us what caused the sentiment to increase or decrease. And it said whenever Gunja Rastogi posts something, the sentiment decreases. I'm like, why would that happen? I didn't post anything bad, but we went back to see what was I posting that was pushing the sentiment down, and it showed me that because I'm not a OneDrive expert, if somebody was asking questions, I was actually looping in people from his team to say, um, maybe this person can answer you, or I'm directing this person to answer you, which kind of was read like I don't know the answer. So what we did to encompass that was the next time we had Yam Jams, we had a side conversation going on where we were talking first, who's answering, and putting it out there, and the issue was resolved. So that's just a small example of how context is important. But this again has helped communicators at Aon, like, what kind of message should they post? Should they post an announcement? Should they post a praise? And it becomes really more important when you focus on groups, because each group is different. Um, if you mention somebody, it increases the sentiment. And sometimes I've also seen when leaders post something, the sentiment goes down. So, it's very interesting to watch um, this set of numbers around influencers.
I
Um,
had one quick question here. So
sure.
kind of thing is May score is
Mhm.
unfamiliar term to me. What is that?
So May score was what we talked about, measure of active engagement, which is
Active engagement. Okay, I
yes,
just couldn't
which is
remember the
basically
acronym.
12 actions that we take on Yammer.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
I got it now.
And then the last one is basically for admins, like us or group admins, which basically talks about hot threads. So hot thread is basically anything which has been really popular in the last 24 hours. There's a lot of activity around them. Or it also gives you what are the unanswered threads. Sometimes people are just posting generic stuff and you don't want to answer them, but you don't want to have a lot of unanswered threads here. It also gives you like recommended, which you should go and look at and answer it, so that you don't have something that is important that you're missing out on. But it also tells you how many days you are taking to respond, um, to people. And the newest thing they have introduced is I can set my KPIs across any of these metrics. So I can say that I want to respond. So, and this is really useful within groups, because let's say we have our own group and I want to make sure that we answer everybody within 24 hours. So I could add another metrics here to say my KPI is 1 day, and it'll tell me if I'm reaching my KPI or not. Or I can say that this is the sentiment score, or this is my sentiment score KPI, or this is my May score KPI, and that's how we want to improve. And we are fairly new to that, so we've not it's not very broadly done. I think I've just started using it within our team, which is also again not very broadly done yet, but it's very new to absorb. But it just gives you more flexibility to see where do you want to focus your time on which KPI. So that kind of helps us, like, as community manager, you would want average days taken to respond to go down. But as a leader, I would want to focus on May score. So that kind of helps you identify your priorities based on the type of groups that you're a part of. So these are things that I'm working on. And we did talk about cleanup, and there was a question around how we decide on groups. Until now, we were just working on how many groups are inactive. But this quarter, we are focusing on dividing those groups into type of communities we have. So some might be communities of practice, but there are some support groups like, like we have a group called Making Most of Technology, where people will post any question related to any technology issue they have. Or we have solution lines or regional groups, or we have like fun groups. So we are trying to divide them to see where do we have maximum people active. But again, it's just become much more easier. That's a little bit more manual, but it's just become much more easier with the amount of data that these dashboards are providing me. And one additional report that is in testing right now is basically thread performance. So a lot of times I get this question: how is our conversation performing vis-a-vis other conversations at Aon? And so we can actually give them like a quick overview to say it's better than average, it's the best performance, etc., etc. Or we can tell them, no, you need to work harder. I've seen those dashboards, but they're still in testing phase, so I didn't include them. And then one additional thing that we're doing, and I'm already doing that at Aon, is social listening. So from all the words that are there within Aon, within the conversations, other than hashtags, I could just type to see how many people are talking about X. So if I was to just go back to TyGraph, and this is like Aon's metrics, but so if I was to just look for COVID, it just gives me social listening to say when people talk about COVID, these are the other words they use. And so when you say these are the other words used, you can actually share this insight with communicators to say, you want to talk about losses. People are talking about these things related to COVID: losses, health. They're talking about insurance. They're talking about workers. They're talking about and they're talking about the environment. So things like that. So you actually can connect one word to the conversations that are happening, which just makes it extremely, extremely powerful again. So those are things that we worked through. And then, I think I just talked so much, but any other questions, thoughts that you have?
This is Michael. I do have a question about the question and answer type of post. Do you have any metrics about based on the post type? I know Q&A is a newer kind of post. Are there metrics just about questions, and are people using the question and answer post type? Are questions getting answered? Are there very popular questions?
Yes,
Are there
so
any
that's
metrics around
something
those?
that is being worked on in the next release. But at our end, what we're doing to improve our data now is at least the top 20 active groups that we have. We would keep an eye on them to see if it's a question type group post. We would go and move it or change it to a question type, because that's a new feature that Yammer has introduced. You can change the type of conversation to question. So far, the reporting that I have, it tracks type of type of post as announcements, post, and praise. Since question and answers, like you said, are comparatively new, it's actually scheduled for a release. But I think one other feature that has been launched for us is very helpful, especially like things like I have a group for Yammer help. I've changed the default group type to say ask us a question, so that when people come in and they click the conversation bar, it just comes up as a question versus, a discussion. But it's coming soon.
So these are awesome metrics, by the way. Did we show at the beginning what actually just you get out of the box from Yammer and kind of compare it, or is everything been on TyGraph? And I apologize, I just missed it at the beginning.
No, so we didn't talk about that at all, but I would just go to Yammer and for users, I'm just going to one of the groups. And Michael, I just picked your group here, but
I guess my question is, if you didn't have that extra product, what percentage of the metrics could you do if you just did it out of what's out of the box with Yammer and Office 365?
It's very little. It's very little because I mean, if I go here and I'm sorry, if I go to what's available today, it's just how many people have seen my conversations, or um, it's not a lot in terms of what's available in dashboards for a normal colleague who's seeing this. Um, it just tells you how many people posted, how many people read. It's pretty basic. There's a lot of extractions that we can do for data, but it still is not that impactful because there's a lot of machine algorithms that TyGraph is providing us today, which helps us go beyond the basic metrics that's provided.
Excellent. Thank you.
So what we're looking at right now, this is what's built in. So it's one page as opposed to all those other reports.
And you know, I
That's what I
haven't
was wondering.
tried it. I haven't tried it in the new Yammer interface, but in the classic versions, tenant admins and Yammer admins could extract certain reports, but some of those reports were just empty. So you know, we could extract a list of all users, and it would give us how many of them are active, suspended, etc., etc. But you know, with Azure Active Directory integrations and Office 365 profiles, those kind of reports have become very redundant for us.
Well, this has been great. I mean, very, very informative, and it's I think really instructive to see the kinds of analysis and meaning and understanding it can gain by
And a nice
examining
methodology.
the data.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I
it's
would
a nice
say
methodology.
that, you know, it might be very overwhelming for a lot of people who see this for the first time. And I have an analytics background before I joined Aon, so I do understand numbers a lot more. I'm a data junkie, so it when I see numbers, it gets me excited to see how is it impacting what we're doing, and that's how we have looked at it from Yammer perspective here. I'm sorry, there was a question, I think, from somebody.
No, I just said you've created a nice methodology. That's all.
Oh, thank you.
Going back to the question of what are out of the box reporting, there is some very basic reporting in the Office 365 admin portal as well, but it is nowhere near comprehensive enough. So it shows you a level of use, but doesn't give you any real insight. At the top level, the report tells me number of activities, change month over month, and counts of number of messages posted, read, or liked. It's really focused on that same level of granularity where I can see on a daily basis the number of posts, reads, and likes. The out of the box capabilities are super limited in that way.
Yeah, I do want to add another thing at the end, which is basically, although what I showed you today was dashboards, and that's available to everybody who is a part of Aon community management. But we do have the data set in Power BI available where, you know, if like I know somebody asked me how many groups on an average is like a particular person a part of. Those kind of things I can just go to Power BI and extract myself because I have the data set. I just need to plot it in a visualization.
This has been fascinating.
Yeah, really informative. So we shift now to open discussion.